most of us feel that we're receptive to what's going on around us and that we're aware of our surroundings. But since what we see, what we take in, is all filtered through our individual perceptions, oftentimes we really don't see what's there, or we see something else, whatever fits into our view, our preconceived view of the world, based on our previous experiences. If my teenage daughter is any indication, I think that today's young people place far less emphasis on our differences as it comes to race than we did, or those who came before us. In a lot of ways, that blindness about our differences is good, but in a lot of ways it's really not, because the only way to true enlightenment and true understanding is to recognize the differences and to accept them. When I was young, I lived in the Lower East Side of New York, and then much of my young childhood in Bedford, Stuyvesant, and Brooklyn. And then we moved to the Bronx. Now, the Bronx doesn't have a good reputation, but from the neighborhoods that we had come from, it was actually a step up. My mother was able to send all 6 of her children to parochial school and later to Catholic high schools. A pretty incredible feat for a single mother. I still don't know how she did it. The tuition costs were prohibitive then, and even more so now. But she felt that education was important, and the best education to be found in New York City during those years was to be found in the parochial school system. So I was fortunate in that way. Well, in New York they had what were called co-op exams for entrance into private or parochial, private or Catholic high schools. So I took this exam, as all 8th graders did, in the parochial school system, and I did well. And I was accepted into Xavier High School in New York. It's a school run by the Jesuits, and it was also a junior ROTC school, but that was optional. So about half the school participated in junior ROTC training. I did myself, and it was quite an interesting experience. Discipline was an important factor in that training. There were many good parts to the junior ROTC, but it showed me enough about the military to know that that probably wasn't going to be the way I would go with as a career choice. Well, anyway, going from this inner city parochial school in the Bronx to this high school, which was difficult to get into and expensive, was quite a change, caused quite a change in my perceptions. Clearly in the inner city, we're mostly African American, Hispanic people, and that was definitely not the demographic of this high school. I was by no means the only person of color there, but I was clearly in the minority. And it started opening my eyes to the differences between uh, myself or people with my background and most of the white or Asian students and their backgrounds. Many of them grew up in houses. I was in an apartment. The the attention paid to their education by their parents was different than mine. Now, my mom thought it was important, and she gave us all the tools. But as far as being able to help or the ongoing structure to having a good academic career wasn't really there. So you really had to do that pretty much on your own. Study habits, general work ethic, uh, the focus on the individual responsibility to the group or to the corps, as you were if you were in the military part of the school. To many of the people I met, these had been things that they were familiar with all along in their earlier years, and it was a struggle in the beginning to be indoctrinated in that. I don't want to say overachieving, but success was important. Academic excellence was demanded. Those 4 years made it for me easier to live in both worlds, to be able to communicate in both worlds. One of the funny things that I remember about that time in my life was, back home in the neighborhood, talking to, guys while playing sports, guys on the street I'd hang out with. They considered the way I spoke, because I tried to be eloquent and speak the language as correctly as I could. They viewed that and expressed it as speaking white. But anyway, I started to say, my perceptions going into that school and the perceptions that I eventually left that school with to continue with the rest of my life really changed in the way that I almost had to learn the differences and to live in their world for that time. And later, when I went into the business world. Not to say either one is right or wrong, but to me it was clear from an early age that if you wanted to be successful in a world with those rules, their rules, it would behoove you to learn them and to use them to your advantage for your own individual fulfillment. Now, none of that changes who I am, what I think. It's just a matter of being aware of your surroundings and acclimating to the point where you can achieve your own success. Along with the speaking white, I would also hear things like selling out, which just didn't make any sense to me. To me, I wanted to succeed, and this was the way to do it. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is that as we grow, we have to continually expand our horizons and update, do a check, so to speak, of how we are perceiving things, because it definitely taints the information that we take in.